It's been almost 5 months since the Evangelion Thrice Upon Time finished its 15 years long quadrilogy marathon. This video is obviously late, but I personally consider it to be the perfect time to give my thought on the Evangelion series. There won't be any lore explanation in this video, since the lore in the Rebuild movie has really gotten out of hand. The lore is merely a plot device. A large amount of the Evangelion lore revolves around ritual and sacrifice. The illusion of anime dressed it up as science, but it's actually not. Let me ask you a question. How many Evangelion pilots does it take to change a light bulb? The answer is none. You simply perform a ritual, toss as many as anime into a pit as sacrificial offerings. A toilet seat that God once sat on will somehow transform into two spears, a spear of Elon Musk and a spear of Barack Obama. They double penetrate the space-time continuum and lead us into the anti-universe, in which you can find a utility named Golu Golu Golu. In the end, comes a headless, elbowless, albino goddess who can make your light bulb changing wish finally come true. You see, the lore is just a tool the director used to make the show smooth and cool. If you really want to know more about the lore, I highly recommend Alex Jones' YouTube channel. It's very constructive.
Believe they're racing using human technology to try to take our best minds and build some type of breakaway civilization where they're going to merge with machines, transcend, and break away from the failed species that is man, which is kind of like a false transmission because they're thinking what they are is ugly and bad, projecting it onto themselves instead of believing, no, it's a human test about building us up. And so Google was set up 18, 19 years ago. I knew about this before it was declassified. I'm just saying I have good sources.
The TV series plus the end of Evangelion, for convenience I will call it the old series, have a relatively simple character relationship. Shinji's friends, his four mothers, his love interests, one good father and one bad father. All of Shinji's problems, those negative feelings, came from people around him. In the first half of the show, we watched Shinji, episode by episode, overcome the struggles of socializing, became a mentally mature person. He accepted Misato's love of a hostess. He gained his classmates' respect through a hardcore battle and later became their close friends. He deeply cared about Rei's well-being, risked his own life opening her entry plug, and formed an unbreakable bond with her. He left an awkward first impression on Asuka, but after living and fighting alongside each other, their relationship was complicated but stable. Everything was so cool until Shinji was forced to deal with a person he couldn't befriend, bond, love, even escape from. Yeah, that's his old man, Igali Gendo, a cunning man who seemed to glue his hands onto his upper lip. Shinji tried to escape from his father, but failed, not only because they are bound by blood, but also due to the bonds Shinji had made with people he cared about. In episode 18, Gendo physically and mentally abused Shinji, shattered his sense of control, and made him murder his friend. That's not cool. A plot-changing event happened in episode 19. This incident changed everything under the kitchen sink. All the characters went on a downward slope. Shinji became a set of school uniforms. Rei got her hardware and software update. Asuka wallowed in her pathetic failure after a few origin stories and one essential gay scene. The end of Evangelion. Oh, did I mention there were side quests? You know, giant robots, funky angels, berserk mode. Nothing really important.
Who cares?
This map also applies to the first and the second Rebuild movies, cause you know the story is quite identical. However, in the third Rebuild movie, without any angel left to fight, the plot's focus has shifted. Shinji, one of the main characters, still gets the larger screen time, but he is not a protagonist. The bonds he made 14 years ago are gone, Without any bond, Shinji is freed. As a prize, he no longer matters in this hellish crimson world. So, who's in charge now? Who is the center of the map? Who sits on the glorious throne of character group dynamics? Could it be Kaoru, the immortal angel who only cares about Shinji's happiness? Maybe Lei, the order taker who enjoys hallucinating in her personal swimming pot? Or the sausage lip Gyaru, or Jet Black from Cowboy Bebop? It's Igali Gendo, the literal airhead.
彼が今回の保管の中心、円環の元だ。
He is the center of the instrumentality this time, the reason for the loop. This is the new map. Lei, Shinji, and Kaoru represent three different aspects of Gendo. We can better understand it with their corresponding objects, or I would like to call them partial objects. Rei's partial object is a book. The book is the medium of knowledge. The good books bestow knowledge to satiate the hunger of heart. The bad books are dangerous. They contain knowledge too powerful for mankind to know, or despairing facts you wish you have never learned. Shinji's partial object is a headphone. The good headphone connects you to the other. It's an excuse to get closer. The bad headphones cut you off from the outside world and help you feign indifference. Kaoru's partial object is the piano. The piano is the embodiment of magnetic view of life. A finely tuned viol would respond accurately to the key that was touched. No deception, no betrayals, no disappointments. The bad piano is broken. It will never give you the note you have in your mind. You cannot figure out the machinery inside. You can't help but come up with the sickening idea that there is no machinery inside at all. The truth is, there is no good book or bad book, no good knowledge or bad knowledge. Knowledge is infinite. Knowledge is a spectrum. Knowledge is ambivalent. We have acquired only a small part of it, but we are confident enough to give it a name. We can't keep contradictory feelings in mind, so we separate knowledge into good and bad. You know, there is a particular type of person who likes doing that. The baby. Imagine being a baby. Your brain is so tiny and useless, you can't understand what this skin-colored warm thing that's playing the familiar heartbeat rhythm is. What does she want? What's in her mind? You don't even think about those questions. The only thing you do understand is her breasts, 'cause it's useful to you. Even if it is the breasts, you can still only partially recognize it. The good breast is here all the baby's needs are satisfied, and the bad breast is here when needs are not satisfied. Gendo is a baby in an adult suit, his immaturity externalized into the human instrumentality project. He wants the good breast, and he doesn't care if the world goes to hell. Gendo was absent during the instrumentality in TV series. His face didn't even show up in Shinji's fantasy. Who's behind the newspaper? It's Ibuki Maya. Kaoru, you are not the only LGBTQ+ character in the show. Gendo shortly appeared in the last scene with Yui to congratulate Shinji. And then, thank you, father. Goodbye, mother. Gendo's absence rendered Shinji's enlightenment meaningless. It was almost like Shinji joined the dark side. He didn't beat the antagonist. In the end of Evangelion, Gendo had more appearances in the process of instrumentality. He confessed that he is afraid of being loved. He rejected the other so that he would never be hurt. He was terrified by the invisible things that people form. That sounds almost like Shinji. This is a classical hero story. The protagonist defeats the antagonist who represents his greatest weakness. Then, the protagonist becomes a better self. The weakness is escapism. which is one of the main points of the old series. In the third and the last Rebuild movies, Gendo is not defeated or undefeated. Violence and fear are not criteria for resolving our conflict. His words during the final battle prove that the idea of battle is useless. This is not a story about hero and the villain. Gendo, in the center of the character map, proactively moved the story forward. He is the most important character for the development of the plot. In other words, a protagonist. Meanwhile, he was also the unspeakable enemy of human survivors. Thus, he is both the protagonist and the antagonist. His unique identity is not a product of an inner demon troupe like Fight Club, nor a Hollywood schizophrenia troupe like A Beautiful Mind. It's a loop. The life as you now live and have lived it, you will have to live once again, and innumerable times again, and there will be nothing new in it. Still, every pain and every joy, and every thought and sign, and everything unspeakably small or great in your life must return to you, all in the same succession and sequence. This is Nietzsche's interpretation of internal return. Simply put, a loop, a scary thought experiment, never ending, no escaping suffering. But that doesn't seem to fit the Evangelion story. Not everything returned in the Rebuild movies. There are enough examples for you. Everyone knew Lilith never skipped a leg day early in the story. Nerve and Seal followed the other tech company's step and had their logo changed. Romama had a heavy period and wiped out the citizens of Bikini Bottom. Double Dancer retired after an internal dance-off. Baby Lava Lamp, Long Leg Daddy, COVID 2015, Watermelon, Asuka's Predator, and Old Telephone Call never showed up. The Rebuild Angels were fancier, stronger, bonier. They composed immediately after death, so eco-friendlier. Perhaps the most significant difference lies in Shinji himself. He is a much more socially functional child compared to the silent child in the old series. I will use two group dinner scenes to prove my point. They happened around the same time, right before the eye drop angel stroked. The virgin Shinji was quiet and timid, curled his body beneath Misato. I bet he wanted to plug in headphones and loop Linkin Park for the rest of the party. However, Chat Shinji was an anime waifu magnet. He cooked, he talked, but most importantly, he took an active role. Instead of being an observer, he offered soup to comfort Rei after group conflict. His chatification caused a chain reaction of positive impact on other characters. That's why before piloting Unit 3, Asuka resolved her inner conflict without the instrumentality. In the old series, this was something that didn't happen until the ending. As a Chad, you can advance. You cannot advance because Gendo struck again. Just like the old times, Gendo physically and mentally abused Shinji, shattered his sense of control, and made him murder his friend. But this time with a different purpose, to carry on the loop. A father wished his child understand his pain. The best way he came up was to let his child go through the same pain of loss. And then the child wanted to avenge his loss, so he made his father suffer the same pain of loss. It carried on and on. The loop of pain ascends into the loop of generation, and then the loop of the world. At the end of Rebuild 2.0, Shinji carried out Gendo's will. He saved Lei from nothingness, and he didn't care if the world goes to hell. The loop theory is very popular among fans. Some say the rebuilds are sequels set after the end of Evangelion, but the characters are entirely different person. Some believe the characters are the reincarnation of former self. I don't know about the other characters, but I do believe Gendo was Shinji, is Shinji, and will be Shinji.
Once again, you're running away. You have to sacrifice everything for your dreams, and that's something you have to do on your own. Nobody else is going to do it for you. It's time for you to grow up, Shinji.
Gendo's view of maturity sounds very like a conclusion of the end of Evangelion. Stop indulging in escapism. Don't rely on others to make your dreams come true. It's the conclusion all series Shinji reached in the instrumentality. Again, it's not about the law. Perhaps Gendo's newly added lines prove that Gendo was the product of the last loop. The Rebuild Gendo very likely represent the post-ending all series Shinji. Based on what happened on the end of 2.0 movies, I'm pretty sure if the loops goes on, Shinji will carry out the human instrumentality project to save Rei, making himself a Gendo. Old series Shinji, Rebuild Shinji, Old series Gendo, Rebuild Gendo. They entangled and overlaid each other. You can't know when one ends and the others begin. The time is so ambiguous that they exist simultaneously and yet no time at all. What kind of loop is that? Nietzsche's interpretation of internal return was not the only one. Jacques Deleuze had a different view of it. The present must coexist with itself as past and yet to come. A point in the loop isn't just a point, it's the combination of thousands of points in the past, right at the same place, and it's holding the possibility of thousands of future points. This point contains a superposition of past, present, and future. Through past, present, and father-son loops, Rebuild Gendo coexisted with himself as Rebuild Shinji. That's the reason he was both the protagonist and the antagonist. The internal return is a force of affirmation, but it affirms everything of the multiple, everything of the different, everything of chance. Deleuze loop has another property. Everything returned is different. The only thing that keeps the same in a loop is the difference. It's a loop of difference. Before being beheaded again, Kaoru delivered the message to Shinji.
魂が消えても願いと呪いはこの世界に残る。意志は情報として世界を伝え変えていく。いつか自分自身のことも書き換えていくんだ。
Kaoru's words explain the loop of difference perfectly. The hero's death is not the end of his journey. His words, his heroic deeds, will be sung by the bard in the taverns and change the world a little bit. But don't forget, the change is also an ambivalent thing. We don't know what's gonna be different in the next loop. But as long as there's changing, hopes remain. Right? Kaoru doesn't lie, but he is selective with the truth. For example, Kaoru showed Shinji an Apocalypse New Tokyo 3 and told Shinji that he was the trigger. But Kaoru knew better than anyone, it's not Shinji's fault. He is the one who stopped this planetary lovemaking. If there was a trigger, it's probably Gendo. The director Ano Hideaki used the same selective truth-telling technique. He doesn't lie to the viewer using narrative or illusional trickery, but he chooses not to shoot the crucial parts which allow the viewer to understand the message behind the story. I'm not talking about what happened in the last 14 years. I'm talking about the two sides of Kaoru, the first angel and the 13th angel, the beginning and the ending, the hope and the desperation.
でも僕の心の中にいる君たちは何？ 希望なのよ。人は互いに分かり合えるかもしれないということの。
好きだという言葉とともにね。
In the end of Evangelion, Kaoru, alongside Lei, played the role of an internal guide, helped Shinji make the final decision. Shinji replied that he knows hope won't last forever, but he is willing to try. Kaoru, why you are the only one not naked? No clothes are allowed in the primordial soup. This is a relatively optimistic ending. The message is apparent. No matter what, don't give up, keep on hoping. But according to what we have learned from the breasts a while ago, hope is ambivalent too. If time is linear, hope is a necessity for Armageddon. With hope, mankind can make through the darkest moment and embracing the best ending. But under loopy-loop time, without a happy ending, hope is reduced to false hope. In the eye of Greeks, time is a loop, so nothing can help us understand hope better than the old Greek myth of Pandora box. When Pandora did her unboxing video, every kind of evil escaped and spread across the world. Only hope remained in the box. That's strange. If hope is terrible, why didn't it leave the box? If hope is good, why didn't it come out? Why it was in the box at all? That's because hope is a special kind of evil. The shining facade outside gives mankind a picture of something better. However, inside, it's the harsh reality that the loop will bring back all the struggles you had over and over. This special evil is not hopelessness, the lack of hope, but the opposite of hope, desperation. Let's rewind to the Rebuild movies. Before Kaoru and Shinji double-piloted Eva Unit 13 and touched the tip of their entry plug, there is a piano scene where Kaoru gives Shinji the idea that if you are not good at something, don't worry, keep practicing through repetition and follow your heart. That's the only way. Well, if the topic was about playing a musical instrument, I think Kaoru was right. But if it is concerning growing up or bonding with people, false hope. I mean, how do you practice growing up? Shrink yourself again and again, live your teenagerhood for 180 times. How do you practice bonding? Married 20 wives, raised an army of kids. These pickup artists, they practice it every day. They must be the sensei of bonding. Let's humbly admire their secret technique.
In other words, if I see a girl with blue eyes, I might say, wow, your eyes are like blueberries. Wait, can I actually, I'm kind of hungry. Can I have? That's one thing that you could go into that is fun and will get a girl giggling within moments.
Wow, incredible. Bow to the true maestro. Kaoru made a huge mistake. Men and women are not musical instruments. We don't work according to mechanical laws. Not only humans, but the world is also not truthful, not crystal clear, and certainly not orderly. As a punishment for his naive thinking, Kaoru was fooled once again by his father. Thus revealed his true identity, the angel of desperation. You can redo because in the loop of difference, we rewrite who we are. You cannot redo because in the loop of difference, hope is nothing else but desperation. So, what's the best way to make friends, find love, and live a meaningful life? The truth is simple. Don't give up. Life is a demanding journey, no matter how hard. I'm sorry, I can't do this too. Giving a human being false hopes knowingly is cruel. I don't know if there are answers at all. If you were an Amish person, life would be so much more easier. Everyone in your community is your friend because you share the same values. You will find your first love at Rumspring or a group singing event. Get baptized, get married, have a bunch of kids. Everything happens in a meaningful way. But the world that most people live in is overwhelmingly complicated. Let's suppose you are about to make a choice in a local store. You choose to purchase headphones. Half of your money will go to a charity that helps improve the living conditions of children in developing countries. Your headphones were made by ethical minority workers in a developing country's labor camp. The worker gets paid $10 a month. It's still better than nothing. The headphone factory pollutes the river nearby, inflicts diseases upon thousands of people downstream in a different country that is waging war against an undeveloped countries using the weapon your country provided. This could keep on and on. You can't even pin it down with words and sentences. How could you know the story behind the ambivalent headphones when you make that choice? Shinji's situation resembles our in a big scale. Any big decision he made came with severe consequences. At first, he chose not to choose, let others decide Asuka's fate, ergo, drowning in endless regret and resentment. When fate once again asked his decision, he chose to save Lei fearlessly and found that destruction of the world was all his fault. The loop repeats itself and reinforces desperation and eventually leads to learned helplessness. Even when opportunity to escape are presented, this learned helplessness will prevent any action. Compared to this, escapism is a better choice. Given that Shinji lived in a web of skin, you can't really blame him. But even in an extreme situation, choices still need to be made. No matter how much damage you cause, you are still allowed to make redemption. That's why the worst choice is not making any choice. You are running away from your responsibility. The person who taught Shinji to take responsibility was no one else but Lei. It's interesting when we put these three together. The interpretation of this trinity are limitless. A mother, a father, and a child. Birth, death, and between. Mayfly life, immortality, and mortality. Symbolic, imaginary, and real. The interpretation I'm about to make is id, ego, and superego. The last two is easy to understand. Kaoru being the superego is overprotected and obsessed with order. Shinji being the ego is the tortured one. Lei, she is nothing like id. The id character is usually childish, impulsive, hot-headed, and chaotic. Actually, the id is not just about aggression and libido. It's also instinctual component of personality, the source of bodily needs, emotional impulse, and desires. Unlike her predecessor, the 3.0 Rei was a hollow character. The only thing she did was taking order. During her brief time in Village 3, Rei was like a baby learning about the world and becoming human. With the help of lazy montage, we are able to pin down two key elements: agricultural labor and social relationship. It's a Marxism approach. Karl Marx believed the intrinsic essence of human is first to treat everything as a tool and actively changing living environment. Second, to socialize. In the show, it's fully integrated with Japanese unique view of nature. And that's how 3.0 Rei regained her id and her identity of 2.0 Rei. But isn't 3.0 Rei an entirely different person? Not exactly, although the physical body and memory swapped it. Reis are connected through collective unconscious. That explains long-hair Rei holding a creepy spamidon. Rei found the id buried deep inside of her. She acquired the desire for a circular life. Her sacrifice was only valid after she bare the name of a human. Therefore, the ritual of transformation on Shinji was succeeded. On the contrast, Gendo's ritual inevitably failed. The advanced anime series were made with pure souls, yet not human. What's the curse of Evangelion? The Evangelion unit prevents its pilot from progressing. It occurred in the 3.0 rebuild as the result of near-third impact. Let's go back to the old series to find the differences. In a pinch, Shinji heard the heartbeat of his mother. Then, he was out of camera for the rest of the episode, indicating Shinji was absorbed by Eva Unit 1. Who's doing the fight? Yui. She wanted to protect her son. In the review movie, Under the Same Crisis, viewers found a pair of red glowing eyes stare at them in a pitch black, as if a lurking, ominous force had found its way out of Shinji. This time, Eva Unit 1 is under Shinji's control. It changed the usage of the AT field from defending to attacking, knock out the enemy in one blow, made the shonen manga comeback. Such a plot is not new to anime lovers. When hero is bruised and battered, the villain raises weapon, ready to deliver the final blow, usually to the hero's loved one. And then, out of nowhere, the hero suddenly changed the tide of battle with his newly gained power. It's called the Heroic Resolve Troop. Depending on the source of the power, it can be divided into 3 subtypes. The inner power subtype. The power comes from hero himself when he is not holding back. In addition to strength, it can also be mental powers like quick thinking in an emergency. It's the most common subtype used by all the protagonists in Dragon Ball series and JoJo Bizarre Adventure. The secret weapon subtype. As the name suggested, hero's power comes from a tool that is better than the tool of villain. It's very popular among old mecha anime, spy movie, and sci-fi. Finally, the devil's bargain subtype. The power comes with a huge price, maybe a mutation or a harmful drug. Anything that turns into the hero's ultimate nightmare after the villain is defeated. Cabanelli of the Iron Fortress and Tokyo Ghoul are the examples come to my mind. That's all the subtype I can think of. Honestly, I'm not a super anime fan, so if I missed something or made a mistake, please correct me in the comment section below. Here comes the question: which subtype does this thing fit? Shinji's red eyes prove it's his inner power. Maybe Yui had something to do with the power, even she was not controlling Eva. But the power still comes from the inside of Shinji's body, so checked. Evangelion Unit 1 was the secret weapon, a powerful tool. The synchro indicate how much of the tool's potential the pilot can realize. So yeah, checked. Power had serious consequences. It became Shinji's biggest nightmare. So checked. In the new generation of mecha anime, I don't think such combination is rare, but I haven't found one anime that fit all 3 subtype troops. The infamous Eva look-alike anime Darling the Franxx, although shares some similar tropes, has major differences. The giant robot is piloted by 2 people. The power comes from their magical friendship/love, and the synchro indicate how much friendship/love they have for each other. There are consequences like short lifespan, but those are just the result of pilot being fertile. Rexiform, Bokura no Tengen Topa Guren Lagan, Star Driver Kakayaki no Takuto. They all fit 1 or 2 subtypes, but weak on the Devil's Bargain subtype. Bokura is the closest one. The pilot will be dead after battle, but it lacks the inner power subtype. There is one anime most likely fitting this combination: Revolutionary Girl Utena. Our heroine's inner power comes from the deals in her memory. The Sword of Deals is the secret weapon here, and if one wants to obtain the revolutionary power, one must first face the nightmare of being pierced by a million swords. Sorry I made a little detour, but it is important to understand why the Rebuild Evangelion unit is so special. It draws power from the inside of the pilot. Its power depends on the sync rate and how deep the pilot dives into it. Obtaining this capability can have serious consequences. What is the Rebuild Evangelion unit? My theory is a fantasy machine trapped inside of a man-made armor, which is a metaphor for symbolic order. In the Berserk scene, the inner power of Shinji was his desire, the desire of getting Rei back to his life. He channeled his desire by going deeper into his fantasy, allowed him to break through into the realm of impossible, hence objectified the being of Rei. To put it in simple terms, Shinji desired something impossible, so he fantasized about it and made it real through the power of the Evangelion unit. But the fantasy was Shinji's own. It's not what Lei wanted.
So he never has to pilot again.
He made his own fantasy come true while dashing the desires of others. He had become a true successor to his father. The moment he actualized his fantasy, his nightmare had just begun. Why would fantasy come true be a bad thing? Isn't that what fantasy about? Hoping for the day it become reality. I'm going to tell you why you should never allow your fantasy come true. The first reason is that the object of the fantasy is only partial. 14 years later, Shinji witnessed with his own eyes that enemy Lei, the object of his fantasy, standing in front of him. But he soon discovered it did not turn out to be what he had expected. The Lei in his fantasy was only partial. Later, Fuyutsuki told Shinji that Lei is just an imitation of his mother. As the truth came to the surface, Shinji touched something disavowed in himself. Saving Lei was a selfish act. The core of his identity is exposed, which is forever mourning for his lost mother. We've discussed the second reason before. The world is too complex, to a point that it would almost always distort our fantasy. Shinji's fantasy never worked out as intended. He wanted to save Lei but caused the near-third impact. He wanted to pull out the spears but occurring another impact. The realization of fantasy only displayed his helplessness against the complicated world. The last reason, fantasy is also protection against reality. If something traumatic happened in life, we tend to fantasize the marginal details to ease our pain. When I was a child, one time I got beat up by the big kids, so I started imagining get pummeled by adults. But what if my fantasy come true? Adults showed up and hit them hard. Was that a good thing? Absolutely not. How could I live my life if those big kids still beat me up? They despised me so much that they came to beat me up even they knew they would be punished later. This is much worse than before the fantasy come true. When Shinji's fantasy actualized, he then had no choice but to face the cruel reality. He lost the will of controlling Eva until Kaoru gave him false hope to rebuild fantasy. Back to the question at the beginning. The curse of Evangelion is the curse of a machine that can realize your fantasy. We often call this machine movie, and in this context, it's called anime. So the curse of Evangelion is the curse of anime. The fantasy machine creates a self-contradictory perception that the fantasy which you dare not to realize is only one step away from you. To put it simply, thanks to anime, we can realize fantasy in front of a screen. In modern isekai anime, the concept of building is a very common thing. It could be building an army, a kingdom, a harem. The protagonist in the anime, the time I got reincarnated as a slime, Rimuru, built an utopia for human and all the fantasy races to live peacefully together. From the weakest monster to the demon lord, Rimuru climbed the RPG ladder, at last joined the ultimate inner circle. One asked the question, do you know Tensila is a fantasy? Anyone with undamaged brain cell would say the following. I am aware Tensila is fantasy. It's not real. I like watching it because I want to escape from reality to a utopia in fantasy. But I'm not going to build an utopia in reality. I know it won't work out. There is a huge problem with this argument. If one really wants to escape to an utopia in fantasy, why isekai? I mean, if there was a building utopia anime with a real-world setting, why would anyone prefer for isekai? Surely, utopia built in the real world is a much more exciting fantasy. Come to think of that, a real-world setting utopia anime is rarely seen. On the other hand, movies have provided us with so many real-world setting utopia and even more dystopia. We desire a better life, but we can't have it, so we create and enjoy the fantasy of a better life. But then we are afraid of fantasy come true, so we escape from the fantasy to a deeper fantasy, a fantasy in fantasy. We don't want to be stripped of the protection of fantasy, so we make sure our fantasy would never come true. Anime, not just isekai anime, prevent us from seeing the ambiguity and ambivalence in others, from understanding the complexity of a living world, from creating the addiction called hope. That's the real curse. First of all, I believe the message is up to everyone's interpretation. Secondly, if the message is a letter sent by the director, I think the recipient of the letter is also the director. To sum up, the message of the Rebuild movies, in my opinion, is something like this. True maturity is to accept the ambivalence in others, to recognize the complexity of the living world, make choices bravely, even if your choices will result in unexpected harm. Be braver in making redemptions. If you feel too much of a burden, you can always retreat to a simpler world. But don't dwell on the past long, for there is a new loop awaits. And most importantly, go watch tokusatsu instead of anime. In the grand finale, Shinji decides to erase all the Evangelions, destroy anime itself. The smooth animation reduced to stop motion, then line and color. The secret of illusion finally exposed to the audience. And it is still working. Oh sorry, I forgot someone. The Rebuild Asuka is Shinji's female counterpart. It is proved by her newly added partial object, the Game & Watch. But she had a much worse growing condition, so he had to grow up fast and face the reality sooner. Infused with the real, Asuka had no choice but to give up the greatest fantasy of mankind, first love, and come to realize the emotion was just envy for what she lacked. And don't forget Mari, she is another important character. Kind of. She is the ultimate deus ex machina. When the plot needed someone to push it forward, Mari show up. There is another character with the same trait, Professor Futsuki. They are the emissary from Yui, to the father and to the son. Now that I've talked about Yui, you should know she was a guardian of the heritage of humanity in the old series. Her job was taken by Kaji and Will, and she worked as the capital god in the Rebuild movies. I don't have that much time to explain it. It's about the Japanese obsessed with maternal love and the longing for an absent mother. Japanese more and more portrayed mother as a messiah figure, and it is related to the fantasy toward motherhood. God slaying liberated mother from such power/responsibility/curse.